So welcome everyone. My name is Michael Alvarez. I'm the director of the School of Medicine Career Center, and we're pleased to have with us Toby Freedman today, who is a scientist who did postdoctoral training in Harvard and at University of Texas at Austin, and later migrated into business and worked in executive search for some time, and took some time off to write a book, which we have in our library, and we have about 5 copies, and they seem to never be on the shelf because people really like her book, and I would endorse it as well. I'd recommend it as an excellent resource to learn about opportunities in drug discovery and biotechnology, and a lot of hidden opportunities, which is what she's going to cover today, things that might not come immediately to mind, but where your skills are extremely relevant and important. So just by way of context, I met Toby compliments of an introduction that was made on LinkedIn. I don't know if you know about LinkedIn, but it's an excellent online site for professional networking, and I would definitely recommend establishing an account there. And I have a lot of folks from Stanford in my own network online, and be pleased to expand that network with you. And it's an excellent way to perform some of the services that an executive search firm conducts, but to manage it yourself. So that's one little plug for that group, and I think it would be helpful to you all. But without any further delay, I'll hand the mic over to Toby, and she'll get started.
Thank you, Mike, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And thank you all for coming out for your lunch break on a beautiful day to hear me talk. So I want to do a little survey before we get going. How many people are actively looking for jobs right now? Oh, so a fair amount. How many people are really interested in just industry? Oh, wow, I'm impressed. And how many people are kind of on the fence? They're not sure. They're kind of deciding. Okay, great. So hopefully today we'll be able to help out there. So I'm going to tell you today a little bit about my project. It was kind of like a second Ph.D. thesis, basically. So what I did was an experiment, and it was a comprehensive and systematic assessment of the careers in the biotechnology, medical device, and biopharma industries. And my research was not hypothesis-driven. It was purely a data-gathering expedition. And the goal was really to find a resource for career planning. So one of the goals is to help people get on the right track so that they're on the right track on their careers. And the second goal is really helping people to do what they love, because a friend of mine actually said, if you're doing what you love, then it's not really work. And why I say that is because people who really love their jobs tend to be more successful and more productive. So my methods, I interviewed over 200 industry professionals. This consisted of a 1 to 2 hour telephone interview. Most of the people that I interviewed were VP level, and most of them had advanced degrees. And I tried to interview about 10 interviews per chapter. After I did all the interviewing, I compiled the data, analyzed it, and summarized it. And then I compiled that and returned it back to the people I interviewed. They reviewed it, and the entire project took 3 years to complete. So it was a very large project. So here are the results. This is a phylogenetic tree. And starting from discovery research, so idea, and going all the way down to sales, so going from product development all the way through the path, to commercial operations, and services. And each of these are a chapter, and each of these lines are career areas. So look at that. Isn't that amazing? There are so many careers out there. It's truly amazing. And I just wanted to, and so what's the best career for you? Well, that depends on you. There's lots of great opportunities, so it depends on, your interest levels, your skill sets. It depends on where you want to go in life, and it depends on, you have to ask yourself, why is it you love science or enjoy science, and what is it that interests you about science? So careers in research. Most of you will start in discovery research. That's because it's the closest to academia. It's the closest to basic research. And what I'm showing here is that a lot of people start in discovery research, and then they work in industry for a while, and they realize, oh, I really love marketing. That's a great fit for my personality. Or I really love clinical development or project management. So what I'm trying to show here is that, the general trend is that people start in discovery research and move out. Do we have any chemists in the audience? Oh, great. What kind of chemist?
Medicinal chemistry.
Oh, great. Okay. So the medicinal chemists, they tend to go into discovery research and preclinical research. And then in the process sciences, we have a lot of the organic chemists, and we have the biochemists. We have a lot of microbiologists, and protein purification, mammalian gene expression backgrounds. And then quality tends to be a sort of large gamut of different kind of chemistry techniques. And do we have any MDs in the audience? Oh, great. So as you can see by the arrow, the big area for MDs is clinical development. MDs are basically rule in clinical development. PhDs do well as well, but MDs are the main players here because you're overseeing clinical development. But a lot of MDs also go into medical affairs, and there's a lot of interesting different types of jobs in the medical affairs industry. There's like a medical science liaison, there's a medical communications, there's continuing medical education. And then a lot of MDs, I've noticed, tend to go into management consulting and venture capital. And this is also venture capital, equity research, investment banking, and institutional investing. And there tends to be a lot of MDs in equity research positions because they're making decisions about whether you should buy or sell a stock. And they're doing that by a clinical basis. Do we have any MBAs in the audience? Okay, well, if you're thinking about getting an MBA, you might consider, these are the areas that would be, actually having an MBA will really help you in all the areas, but I've noticed that the MBAs tend to congregate in these major areas, mainly marketing. That tends to be the one area where a lot of MBAs go, and that's a fabulous career. So I kind of you can slice and dice this millions of different ways. So one of the things I wanted to slice and dice was if, for people who want to have a 9-to-5 job, they don't want to do much travel, maybe they want to raise a family. And there's some really great career opportunities in industry if you want that type of job. In clinical development, there's an area called medical drug safety, and that's a great 9-to-5 job. And it's great for raising a family. Another one is technical support. And people really love their jobs in technical support. It's a very team-oriented place. Gosh. And people really love working there. And then also in operations and manufacturing, some of those jobs can be 9-to-5, and some of them cannot. Depends on if you're a supervisor or not. In quality is definitely a 9-to-5 job for especially somebody who's an individual contributor. That's definitely, if you want to know what exactly you're going to be doing for the next 3 to 6 months, and you don't want any new introductions or changes, that's a great career to have. And then in law, there's patent agents, and a lot of people work from once they become a patent agent, they can work from home, they can consult. So there's lots of good jobs if you want a 9-to-5 job. Of course, if you don't want a 9-to-5 job, there's there's lots of options there. Okay, who wants to be CEO one day? Oh, come on. Okay. Well, if you want to be a CEO, there's lots of great places to get the right type of training. And what I've noticed is a lot of CEOs come from discovery research. Project management is actually a really great place for training to become an executive leader. You're basically managing projects and running programs. It's a great place to get that type of training. There's a lot of people in clinical development that eventually become CEO. And marketing and sales is actually one of the key areas. So I did a survey, and I found that if you do a survey on the CEOs in the pharma industry, most of them come from sales and marketing. But if you do a survey for the CEOs from the biotech industry, about half of them have PhDs and the other half come from sales and marketing. So if you really want to go the executive route, really consider marketing. It's a really fabulous career. Business development is also really, really valuable to learn how to become a CEO because you're making deals, and so it's good, really good training to become a CEO. Operations is a natural. So typically, the COO, the Chief Commercial Officer, is the person next in line to become the CEO. So that's a great area. Management consulting, also a great overview of the industry, and that can help. A lot of venture capitalists become CEOs, and then they go back to venture capital, and they go back into being a CEO or an executive manager. So there's a lot of VCs who were CEOs, and a lot of lawyers become CEOs. That seems to be pretty common. Who wants to make a lot of money? Come on, everybody wants to make a lot of money. All right, so I've pinpointed the areas where you can make lots and lots of money. So let's start with clinical development. This area is probably on this side of the chart. It's by far the most paying job. That's because the MDs are there. And so the industry has to compensate for the MDs, and so they give them a higher salary. So as a consequence, there's more MDs, and so the salary's higher. Medical affairs is also a lot of MDs, so that's kind of high. Marketing and sales pay really well. Business development pays extraordinarily well. Management consulting, we all know. Venture capital and law probably pay the most. So venture capital and investment banking actually probably pays about the most of all of these careers. And lawyers, if you become a successful lawyer and a partner in a law firm, you can make millions. So not everybody becomes that, right? But it's a really great job if you really want to make a lot of money. However, I want to warn you that there's a positive correlation between stress and making a lot of money. And in fact, there's a funny quote that I have which talks about investment banking where they said that the only 2 days that you can take off work is at your own wedding and at your own funeral. So, give you a sense of, so these are definitely not 9-to-5 jobs. If you love writing, there's lots of great jobs for people who have a passion for writing. In clinical development, there's a medical writing career. In regulatory affairs, a lot of that is actually writing, so you have to be very proficient in writing to do well in that area. Marketing, there's an area called Marcom, Marketing Communications, which involves a lot of writing. Corporate communications, again, a lot of writing is involved. And of course, law. You really need to be a good writer to go into law. The hidden jobs. So what I want to say here is there are lots of hidden opportunities in this phylogenetic tree where people don't initially consider before they go into industry. So most people think about discovery research, and that seems to be the major area. But unfortunately, that's the area that has very job insecurity, and there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of projects fail, clinical trials fail, companies are acquired. You bring in a new VP of research, and he's a cardiologist, so he kicks out all the whole neurobiology department. So there's a lot of volatility in discovery research. So there's a lot of people kind of in industry now looking at these other areas. So these other areas are more applied science. So you can be fully immersed in these areas in science and still be doing well. And these areas are kind of more regulated. They tend to be more regulated, and they take a longer time to learn the ropes. So so another area of hidden jobs is the bio-IT world. There's a lot of different areas in bio-IT, but those are areas that people don't really consider as a career choice. People usually don't consider quality, and that's actually a good area to be in. And most people don't consider operations and manufacturing as well. And those are all really great areas to go into, areas that are kind of off the beaten track that people don't initially consider when they're looking for jobs. Does anybody have any questions so far? Yeah.
Can you describe what
takes place in quality assurance?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of qualities. There's quality control, and those are generally the chemists, and they're doing techniques to show that everything is correct, chemically correct. And then there's quality assurance, and what that is, it's the reverse of regulatory affairs. It's basically making sure that everything is up to code and is good quality inside the company. So that if company is audited, that everything internally has been taken care of and it's up to code. And then there's also quality systems, and that tends to be more of an IT function. And there's a whole bunch of areas in there. There's like validation. I forget all the areas, but there's like about 5 or 6 areas in there. IT quality, a bunch. Yeah. A good question. Okay, the hot jobs. So the hot jobs right now, definitely regulatory affairs is the hottest job. And that's because it takes a really long time to get to learn how to do regulatory affairs. And it's very applied. So that is the job that is in the highest demand right now. And the next one that would be really in high demand is accounting. Those people are in really, really high demand. Again, the hot jobs are kind of related to the hidden jobs. All these areas are, once again, more applied science. So again, you could be fully immersed in the science, but doing more applied, laser-focused science to develop products. Oops. Let me go back. And one more thing I want to talk about is which jobs are difficult to break into. So some of the areas that are marketing is really difficult to break into. That is a fabulous career. Once you're in marketing, it's tremendous. There's lots and lots of career potential. There's lots of interesting things you can do. But the problem with marketing is you're competing with the MBAs and the sales reps. So it's really, really competitive. It's really hard to get in. The other thing about marketing and sales is if you want to go to a biotech company, you have to have a product. Well, most small biotech companies don't have products. So if you're interested in marketing, you should consider a biotech company with a product like Gilead or Genentech or these big companies, or you might consider pharma, or you might consider medical device companies. So that's where you want to go if you want to go to marketing. Business development is an area where a lot of people want to go into business development, but there just aren't that many jobs. And the reason is because in a drug discovery pipeline, a drug discovery company can maybe have 5 or 6 different business development deals in its lifetime. And so a VP of business development can step in, do all the deals, and leave. And so there aren't enough deals to train people. So it's a really, really difficult job to get into. The other areas really competitive is, of course, venture capital and investment banking. Everybody wants to become a venture capital. They want to be on the side of giving money to companies, but there are just limited opportunities there, and everybody wants that job. So you're competing with, very, very successful entrepreneurs and CEOs who have been applying, and it's really difficult. And the other one is equity research. There's only about 200 to 300 biotechnology analysts in that field, so there's just not that many jobs in those areas. So moving on, I just want to close with this area, this section with saying there are lots and lots of opportunities, and you really need to do a little self-assessment, maybe work with your career counselors, and think about what interests you, why you like science, what are your skill sets, and what do you want to do with your life, and then really study these areas and think about where you want to go. Now, we can talk a little more about hidden jobs. So most people, when they think drug discovery, they think of a company that's developing a drug. So what I show here are these drug discovery development companies. But in fact, there's all these other areas, and they are all hiring, and they all have very good jobs. So be outside the box. Don't just think therapeutic companies developing drugs. Consider the tools. And what the tools are companies that are making reagents, instruments. There's the platform companies like the genomics and the proteomics companies. There's bio-IT, software and diagnostics. And then the services. Now, the services love to hire freshly minted Ph.D.s and M.D.s. And so the services would be management consulting, law firms, venture capital, but the main ones are contract research organizations and contract manufacturing organizations. And they're providing a service to the biotechnology and pharma companies. And they really love to hire freshly minted scientists. And what you could do is work there for a while, and you would get a big exposure to all their clients, which are the pharma and biotech companies, and then eventually jump over to the pharma companies. Other areas, lots and lots of agencies, PR, advertising, market research, medical communications. There's lots and lots of little agencies or big agencies. They love to hire scientists as well. So other pharma areas, industrial biotechnology, that's like Genencor. There's veterinary companies. Another area that's really neat right now that's growing is nonprofits and social philanthropy. I just completed a search for a really fun position for a scientific officer of a nonprofit. And they tend to be hiring scientists right now, and it's a really, really fun job where you get to work with academics and work with industry and sort of bridge that gap. And so there's a lot of new nonprofit business models that are coming out, and they're hiring scientists, and it's a really, really fun job. Another area that's really hot right now is clean tech, energy. So there's a big, big surge right now, especially in the Bay Area, of companies developing biofuels and all sorts of energy, and that's pretty hot right now. The government, that is also a really great place. If you work at the FDA, you're really very, very marketable because you have inside knowledge of how the FDA works. And so that's a really great place to look. Unfortunately, that's in Washington, D.C. So if you're willing to relocate, that's a good place to look. But there's other very good government jobs. There's the CDC, NIH, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, lots of research institutes, Homeland Security and Defense. There's a lot of money in that area right now. There's some miscellaneous ones like the CIA, FBI, NASA, and trade commissions. And then another very good industry is medical devices. Medical devices is a much more stable industry. It has less product risk. The clinical trials are shorter. So it's a much more stable industry. And there's a lot of really good medical device companies here in the Bay Area. So think about those as well. And then in academia, there's also very good jobs in the technology transfer offices. And then you can work in industry-supported labs or be an educator. So there's lots and lots of areas besides just working in a therapeutic company to consider. And in actuality, most people are applying to these jobs. So if you want an advantage, consider all these other areas because there's less people applying, it's less competitive. So let's talk about the product development overview. So most companies have an idea, and that's developed in discovery research. And that could be from academia, or it could be from inside a company. And those ideas are optimized, usually chemists, medicinal chemists. And then if the very successful ones go into preclinical studies. And those are studies done in animals and animal models. And they really want to make sure that that product's going to work well before they put it into human clinical trials. During that same time, there's a bioprocessing development so that they can scale up whatever the drug candidate is and prepare it for clinical trials. And then there's an IND filing. And the regulatory affairs is in charge of that in addition to everything else, but that's one of their roles. And then if the product is successful, it'll go into clinical trials, and there's 3 clinical trials. And during that time, you will also have scale-up in manufacturing. And if the product's successful, they'll file an NDA or BLA. And if it's reviewed by the FDA, it's approved. And after it's approved, then you go into commercial operations and sales, so marketing, sales, that type of role. And then you go into this area called medical affairs, which are doing additional clinical studies, such as drug indications, different populations, other indications for the drug. So this is a whole other area. And that's a fun area because you're combining clinical with marketing. But I just want to point out that this is a risky endeavor. So a typical company, maybe a mid-sized company, in discovery research, they'll screen maybe millions of compounds. And then during preclinical studies, they'll start with 6 to 7 and result in 1 to 2. And this is, all very approximate, generalized. And then if those 1 to 2 candidates will go into clinical development, and 1 in 6 of those are marketed. So you can see that at each step, there's risk involved. And I also want to point out that most drug discovery companies, biotech companies, they're very good at the discovery research all the way to clinical trials, but then they tend to license their clinical products to the pharma companies. So the pharma companies, and this is a generalization, tend to be really good at the clinical trials all the way into the sales and marketing. So that's kind of what's going on out there in the industry. In general, some companies like Genentech, do the whole process themselves. And I also want to add that each of these little boxes may seem like a little box, but actually it's very, very deep and vast, and there's lots of science in there. There's many Ph.D.s level of information in each of these boxes. And you could work in one of these little boxes and be fully immersed in lots and lots of great science and be at the cutting edge, and it's really interesting. So I wanted to give you a general sense of a career ladder in discovery research. So most people start out as a postdoc, and I want to add that if you're a postdoc for 1 year or 20 years, it doesn't matter. If you still start as a scientist 1, generally speaking. So you move to scientist 1 to 3, and that takes, 5 to 7 years, and then you can become a group leader. And then there's a dual career track. So some people, if they're really, really outstanding scientists, but they don't want to have the administrative function or they don't want to manage people, there's a prestigious track called a fellow or principal scientist. And those are for people who just want to muck around in the lab and love doing research. And not everybody is good enough to get into that world, but that's a very nice world. It's very similar to academia, in fact. And then if you want to go the more administrative route, you can become a director, a VP of research, VP of R&D, and CEO. And this is kind of a generic career ladder. It's not, most people, you rarely see people do this exact route. And I wanted to give you a sense of salary, because I've noticed that there tends to be a lot of unrealistic expectations of what people are earning. So a postdoc in the Bay Area, at least, it generally can earn from $60,000 to $90,000 in their first year. And then a group leader, you're looking at maybe is that too low? What? Oh, yes, yeah, in industry, yeah. Oh, okay, a group leader, 5 to 7 years, maybe 120 kind of range. And then a VP, and not everybody becomes VP, so, don't think that if you get on this track, you're going to become a VP. But if you do, you're looking at 200, something, 220. It depends on the size of the company, right? Big pharma pays more than small biotech companies. And CEOs is all over the map. Yeah?
How much a scientist level 1 make?
Oh, well, it depends on your background. So if you happen to be, it's supply demand. Everything is supply demand. So if you happen to be in preclinical science, you're going to be earning more than if you're in discovery research, because people in preclinical science have rarer backgrounds. So they would be toxicologists, pathologists, in vivo pharmacologists. So those people have rarer backgrounds, and chemists also tend to have rarer backgrounds than like the scientist, biologist types. So it's really a supply-demand thing, yeah. But for most biologist types, I was wanted to give you a sense of what and this is, management consulting pays more. Other areas pay more than discovery research. So why work in industry? I interviewed over 225 people, and I asked everyone, why is it that they like their jobs? So does anybody have a guess as to what the most common answer was? Money? Actually, that was very rarely mentioned. I think maybe the lawyers and investment bankers maybe mentioned it, but but yeah, good guess. Any other?
It's actually tangible and more translational, so we can actually see it work someday.
That's good. That's getting close. I mean, that's kind of it. So the real reason that is that people are highly motivated to develop drugs to help people to cure diseases, and that is the major motivating factor. Yeah, I mean, it really is. And just about everybody I talked to, it got old. I talked to 225 people, and they all said the same thing. So everybody loved their job because they really are very highly motivated, and they love working with other people who are also very energetic, bright, highly motivated, and also working to develop a product to cure diseases. And I don't know if you have, friends and relatives who are sick. It's really, really so rewarding. I myself worked in a startup when we were developing products for cancer, and I have to say, there's just nothing more motivating and inspiring than to work in a company where you're really trying to make a big impact in the world. So additional reasons why people enjoy working in industry. One of them was applied results, which you just mentioned, and the fact that everything's kind of razor focused. You're working towards a product and it's applied. People love the team orientation, and that's something I haven't mentioned. Most projects are big; they're humongous, and when they're so big, there's many. There's teams, and there's different types of teams, but what ends up happening is you'll have a head of clinical, regulatory, marketing, chemistry, all working together, putting their heads together and really coming up with strategies on how to get the product developed. And people really love that team orientation, the camaraderie that develops when you're working hard on getting products developed. There's numerous careers to consider, which we already talked about. There's lots of job variety. I mean, just about everybody's mentioned that they love their jobs because every day there's multiple things to do. It's never boring. There's never a dull moment. I heard that over and over. Another point that was echoed over and over was this concept of intensive and continued learning. So, just in the industry, there's constant learning. You need to keep up with the cutting edge. And then in the discovery research specifically, a lot of people went into industry to do big science. So that means like the genomics, huge numbers of people working on projects, and they had lots and lots of instruments, and these giant projects and answering really huge questions that you can't really do as easily in academia. So a lot of people really like those reasons. What about the negatives? Any guesses? What? Stress. That's definitely, yep. There's stress, and the one I talked about before, job security was the big bad one. So there's not a lot of job security in industry, and especially if you're working in a small company, you miss the milestone, you run out of money, lots of things can happen. A project fails, so job security is really a problem. It's there. It's a fact. And a lot of people didn't like the travel. A lot of these jobs require a lot of travel, and that's fine when you're young, but when you have a family, it can become burdensome. Stress and deadline pressure was another major issue. Work is really different. You're managed by objectives. They give you objectives. They expect you to reach those objectives, and there's a lot of stress. Things are fast-paced in industry. One of the things that, especially for discovery research, was, when you do an experiment and you have an interesting result and you have like 10 interesting results, well, in industry, you really can't focus on those 10 interesting results. You really have to stay on track, get that product developed, so you have to be sort of more laser focused. There's no time to muck around with these other interesting results of your research. Another point that was really common was that project failures and terminations are frequent, and it's very disappointing to work really hard on a project for 5-10 years and see it fail in clinical development. And another negative aspect was the decision making, and what I mean by that is you'll be working on a project and the project's going well, but if somebody in marketing might say, oh, that area has no market potential, or the market isn't big enough, so they terminate the project. So you have no say in that decision making when you're at the bottom, or you're at the lower parts. You don't have a lot of say, and so people find that frustrating. But there are things to do that you can do to increase job security. So one thing is to learn new skills, and that makes you more marketable. You can become a recognized expert in a niche area. So if you were to lose your job, people think highly of you and they would want to hire you. Another area is to work in large companies with robust pipelines, because if one project fails, they have other projects, and so you can just move to those. You can work in biotechnology hubs, so that would be San Francisco, San Diego, and Boston, so that if you were to lose your job, you don't have to relocate. And you should stay flexible in your career, meaning if you are, in discovery research and you lose your job, maybe you should consider project management or clinical development or these other areas, because try to stay flexible. Themes to excel. So again, I interviewed 225 people, and I asked all of them, what are the personality attributes to be successful? And I noticed that regardless of whatever career I was talking about, marketing, sales, recruiting, business development, discovery research, I noticed that the same, 8 or 7 things popped up over and over and over. So any guesses of what those are? Come on.
About your job?
What?
Passionate about your job?
Passionate about your job. Yeah, definitely they want a gung-ho, go get 'em kind of person. That's definitely true. Any other guesses?
Communication?
Yeah, communication was mentioned practically every time. So communication is really important. Being able to communicate verbally and orally, written, and also, being able to express yourself effectively without alienating other people. That was a huge one. Just about everybody mentioned that. Any other guesses? Team player, yes. Definitely you have to be a team player. Not always, but pretty much everything's in teams. It's really, really helpful. That's good. You guys are good. Any other ones? Leadership. That's true for the leadership positions, yes. Well, let's give you the answers. So the number one was actually flexibility. And the reason is because it's such a dynamic world. So your boss may leave, and you have a new boss. You may have to work on a new project. You may have to change careers. You may be working on a project and somebody says, oh, no, you got to work on this other project. So flexibility was mentioned just over and over, a really, really important skill to have. Communication skills we talked about, team player interpersonal skills, we talked about these, ability to multitask, and that kind of relates to the reprioritization skills. Being able to see the forest through the trees, and what that means is having a high-level view of what you're doing, but also paying attention to the details of your job at the same time. Ability to understand the customer's point of view, and so you might say, oh, I'm in discovery research, I don't have a customer, but you do, that's your boss. So everybody has a customer. And the final one was creative problem-solving skills, and that's really, really needed in industry. So looking at this list then, what I wanted to add here is that if you are interested in a career in industry, this is kind of a generalized, nobody's perfect, but this is kind of a generic sense of what success looks like if you want to fit in. So you should look at this list and say, am I all those things? And do I have innate skills in these areas? Because if not, maybe you should consider academia instead. Or something else. But you should, and also think about, is that the kind of corporate culture you want to work in? So that's just, and the other thing to think about also is when you're interviewing, these are the qualities that hiring managers are looking for. They may not be all of them because everybody's different, but these are the qualities. So I want to add one more important point, which is that after telling you everything I've told you, the pros and cons of working in the industry, I want to say that academia is also very attractive. It plays a very important role in society. It's essential here. Tenure is a wonderful thing. After talking about job security, you know now, you've been forewarned, tenure is wonderful. People love tenure. Pension plans are also wonderful. Most people would take pension plans over stock options at this point. There seems to be more freedom in decision making, although you have to apply for grants. And then the other area that I think is an interesting point is if you're the type of person who wants to really become an expert in a narrowly focused field, academia is great. Industry, they really want you to have, in general, they want you to have a diverse knowledge of lots of things. That makes you more marketable, and a lot of the areas in industry where people work requires a diverse knowledge. So, so think about those things when you're all of you who are kind of trying to decide which areas you want to go into. So what can you do now to help you eventually land a job? Well, you can start working on projects that are related to human disease. You can even start doing drug screens in your lab. You can form collaborations with industry. That will really help you make the next step. You can gain experience with clinical trials. Publish and publish and publish. Hiring managers really look at that. They really care about that. Give lots of presentations and basically gain visibility out there in the national conferences so that, if you are looking, people have heard of you. And another thing you might want to consider is doing a postdoc in industry. And follow the industry news. You can start doing that now. How many people are members of BioSpace? Oh, that's pretty good. So BioSpace is free. There's a thing called Gene Pool, and you just sign up your name, and they'll send you emails every day, and it's all the news of what's going on out there in the life sciences industry, and it's a really good resource. There's also Fierce Biotech, which is as good, and I just want to add that just about everybody that I interviewed in the Discovery Research chapter highly recommended Nature Biotechnology and Nature Reviews Drug Discovery. They said that those journals really are on the ball. So if you want to start reading about those areas, that's a good area to go. Another thing you can start doing is building your network. And in fact, most people, about 65, they did a study and they found that 65% of the people found jobs through their network. So if you really want to start looking for a job, start building your network, get to know people. So career planning. So these are kind of recommendations that came to me from the people that I interviewed. And one of them was to go from a big company to a small company. And the reason for that is it's better to get training in the big organizations first. Because you learn how the big players do things before you go to a startup. A startup's really, really fun to work in, but they tend to be resource constrained. They can't train you. They don't have time to train you. They don't have a lot of resources. So it's much better just to learn in the big companies. And a lot of times they allow you to get an MBA or they give you management classes. So consider doing that. I mean, just something to think about. Another point is embracing the concept of continued lifelong learning. If you go into industry, you need to stay at the cutting edge and keep up with the research. It's really important. Career advice: pick your boss, not the company. This is really, really important. And if you've ever had a bad boss, it's really like locking horns. But the point is, your boss relationship in industry is really different. So your boss will be reviewing you. If it's a big company, they'll review you twice a year, and they'll give you a performance rating. They're going to be managing you by objectives. So they're going to give you discrete objectives, and they want to see you do your part. And not only should you do your objectives, but they're going to evaluate you according to how well you fit in the team, which is all those interpersonal skills that I talked about earlier. So it's really important to have really good chemistry with your boss because they may be mentoring you and coaching you and giving you career advice. So really, really try to make sure that you have good chemistry. Another point is to fit into the culture of a company. Now, every company has a different culture. So some of them are slave drivers, culture. Some of them are, laid back. I mean, they're all different. Every company's different. So I would recommend, interviewing as much as possible and doing your due diligence and researching the company and figuring out, is that the culture that fits your set of values? Another point is to interview the company as much as they interview you. Again, do a lot of due diligence, especially if you work with a recruiter. Recruiters are not going to, maybe will not tell you everything about the company that you need to know. So you need to do your own due diligence on a company. So I interviewed a couple of really heavy hitters in the industry. I was interviewing a VP of Merck, and he said that one career advice he offered, and I wanted to share this insight with you, is that a lot of people from academia, they come into industry and they interview like a postdoc. And what that means is being, scientifically aloof, And he's, and I did that too, so I'm equally guilty. So what he wanted to say is really, show enthusiasm, show interest, say, ask questions, tell them you really want to work there, show excitement. It's different in industry. You don't need to sell yourself, but just show your enthusiasm. And another point is to find your niche. So everybody has a certain place in the life sciences industry, whether it's academia or industry or anywhere else, really find where you fit in the big picture and be successful and do what you do best. A couple points about the economic circumstances. Currently, there were a lot of layoffs here in the Bay Area. And I want to point that out. So if you are actively looking for a job right now, it's a real tough time. There's a lot of layoffs, lots of talent out there looking for jobs, and you're competing with them. And there's also layoffs in pharma and also in the medical device world. So I just want to say that if you are looking for a job, don't take it personally. It's really tough out there right now. But the good news is that the venture capitalists are funding biotech and medical device companies. And this is the third quarter investments for 2007. And you can see software is the number one, but biotechnology, over $1 billion was invested in the biotechnology industry last year. And that was only the third quarter, so I'm sure it surpassed that. And then the next one is energy. So again, biofuels. If you can go into the energy field, that's really hot right now. And then the next one is medical devices. So these three areas here are all related. So it's very promising right now. A lot of VC money is going into the life sciences, which is very encouraging. So I think things are going to pick up. And this was taken from PricewaterhouseCoopers Money Tree. You can go to their website and follow that. The future of biotech is really promising. We have many significant unmet medical needs that still we need to find cures for. So we have Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, lots of infectious disease, diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular diseases. All these areas we still need to develop drugs, and those are big markets. Energy is a huge market, obviously. We have an aging population in the United States, and there's also tremendous market opportunity growing in China and India. So overall, I think that the biotech industry is very promising and posed for success. So it's a great industry to be in right now. And that's it. I want to thank you. I want to wish you much success in your endeavors. And from the bottom of my heart, I wish you find a cure for cancer. I have a couple more slides. Speaking engagements, I will be speaking at Alternative Careers in Medicine series on April 7th in Stanford, and that will be maybe the first 5 minutes will be the same, but everything else will be different. I'll talk more about the different types of jobs. I'll talk more about what do hiring managers really look for when they're interviewing you, and I'll probably talk about job strategies. I'll talk more about, if you're actively looking for jobs, this would be a good talk to go to. And my books will be available at the campus career centers. My contact information is here. And I'd like to, and no slide is complete, no talk is complete with acknowledgments. I'd like to thank the generosity of over the 225 people that I interviewed. These are very busy people, and they spent over an hour with me, and it really sort of shows the altruistic nature of this industry. And I would like to provide special thanks to several people who helped me, and in particular my father and my husband, who edited many, many, many chapters. And this is my joke slide. If only books grew on trees. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
let me just offer that we do have sandwiches. We've got lunch and a reception out here when we can talk informally with Toby. So if you want to help yourself to some lunch, that's another way you can ask questions more personally. But if there are questions that would be good for the broad audience, please feel free to ask a few. I know we're short on time, so that might be another factor. We're getting close to the end. So.
Any questions?
Can you go back to the top slide right now? Just 2 slides ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And also your email address. I'll have it.
Okay. It's going to be on the website.
This is going to be on our website.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
the 17th,
And
Toby will be back. That's actually the day we're having our own biotech industry recruitment event. So those will be happening simultaneously.
These are some things you might want to consider also. And I'll have more job search resources on the 17th. Yes?
Just really quickly, could you touch on what recruiters look for and sort of how they evaluate candidates?
Oh, good question. Hiring managers. Yeah, that's a really good question, and yeah. So one thing that you really should think about when you're writing your resume is try to put your therapeutic area. So the industry is sectioned off into therapeutic areas. So if you can in some way relate what it is that you do, whether it's infectious diseases, cardiovascular diseases, oncology, these major therapeutic areas, put them up front and in big letters, because what recruiters are doing is they're doing a 30-second scan of your resume and they're looking for keywords. And they want to see that you're an expert in whatever it is the company is doing. And if you're missing those keywords, it's going to go over to the wrong place. Another time, sometimes you need to just state the obvious. So, for example, I recently got a resume from a lady, and she had all these techniques and everything, and I was like, well, what is it you want to do? There was no objective. She's like, I want to be a biochemist. And I was like, well, it wasn't written in the resume once. There's no biochemistry. I'm not interested in, nothing mentioned about biochemistry. So, keep it really obvious, keep it general. Instead of saying I'm working on P53, say I'm oncology, keep it kind of higher level. Those are things I would recommend as major ones. Another thing is when you're applying for jobs on websites, always, if you can, include a requisition number. For example, Genentech. If you do not include a requisition job number with your resume, your resume gets shunted to another database, and you're less likely to be contacted. So that's really important. And keep your resume simple, attractive. Simple file. Keep it bulleted. They're really going to scan. So you prepare for a 30-second scan. They're looking for keywords.
I would comment.
Go ahead.
So you said you list sort of attributes that the people are looking for. How do they sort of evaluate flexibility?
Oh, they can't. You can say whatever you want, but they're not going to listen to that. I mean, just about every resume says great interpersonal skills. So they have to meet you for that, or talk to you over the phone. So they'll get a sense of that over the phone. But another great way, the best way to get into a company is to network. And especially since employees are incentivized to bring in people. So they want you in there. Yeah.
I have a couple of additional points on this because I think it's very important. Everything is exactly that you've said. I think I agree with completely. Networking is key, and making sure that the sequence of your activities is appropriately lined up so that you do research on the companies before you go submitting the resume, not the other way around. And so, use job descriptions, use your network to learn more about the nuanced factors that are really important and on the minds of the people inside of a company, so that when you prepare your materials, the second point, which is a famous Mark Twain quotation, he said to a colleague he was corresponding with, apologies, if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, at the end of it. Because that is really your task, is to protect them from superfluous information. If you're thinking about your own background and what you have been doing, and you include it all, it's going to be very difficult for them to interpret how it is. And back to your question about how you can communicate your ability to be flexible or to actually have good communication skills, they're going to infer all of that by how it is that you feature yourself. So that you don't need to tell them that you communicate well. You either do or you don't in the manner that you've presented yourself. So they're going to assume something about your ability to communicate based on how it is that your materials reach them.
And that reminded me, a couple of people I interviewed said that, and flexibility, if you went from like yeast, studying molecular biology of yeast, and then you went to Xenopus, and you were studying, chromosome segregation, and then you went to something, that shows flexibility. And they like that. They like the fact that you could take on new topics, for what it's worth. Yeah.
Where do you find those requisition numbers you mentioned?
On the websites.
What website?
Whatever company you're applying for, they will have.
Is there like a resource, a good resource we can get started with?
Well, you would need, so you probably would go to a biotechnology directory, click on all the biotechnology companies that there are, and then look at their careers, and then with each career opportunity, some of them have requisition numbers, some of them don't, but the big companies definitely do. And it's like putting an address to your resume so that make sure it goes to the right person. So if you don't do that, it's just not going to go to anybody. And another point, too, is HR, actually, a couple of people I interviewed in HR said, really, you should have an objective in your resume because they don't have ESP. So, if they get a resume and it's, science and stuff, but they don't know what you want. You could want project management. You could want, preclinical work. You need to really objectively put in your objective really clearly, I'm a Ph.D. scientist in immunology looking for a research scientist position. Make it really as clear as possible because otherwise they just look at it and they don't know what to do with your resume. Yeah.
I had a question on career advancement, and I was curious how many of the, say, VPs have been with the company for 5 or 10 years, or is there a lot of lateral movement?
That's a good question. Typically, your job stability is better in the bigger companies than in the smaller companies, although that's kind of changing now with a lot of M&As. But in general, definitely small companies are very, very risky, volatile, and the smaller the company, the more risky it is. The medium-sized companies are better, but even they're pretty volatile. So I've seen anywhere from people can join a company and be gone in 2 weeks because something happened, and I've seen people stay at a company for 20 years. So it's all over the map. But definitely, you want to think about that because it's really, right now, I never thought about it when I was a postdoc, right, about job security. But it really is an issue because you're working at a company for 10 years and all of a sudden you lose your job. It's really unpleasant, and and it is really something to consider. So the best thing to do is to be in a bigger company so that if your department is closed, try to transfer into another department. Yeah.
So there's probably some other questions, but in the interest of kind of keeping everything on schedule today, we're going to try and close here and then take our questions out to the lobby here. So thanks.
Great, thank you.